Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Nedarim 16, and we're going to start on the bottom of 15b at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Shvua she'eni yashin, she'eni medaber, she'eni mehalech aser. If a person takes an oath that he's not going to sleep or speak or walk, then he's going to be prohibited to do all those things, because even though a vow does not take effect, a neder does not take effect on something that's not tangible, a shvua, an oath, does take effect on something that's not tangible, so therefore the oath will take effect. But now the Mishnah switches over to nedarim, to vows as opposed to oaths. Karban lo ochalcha, meaning to say, this is how the Mefarish explains it, as though he says, this sheep, this carbon of yours, that which is a carbon of yours, I won't eat from you, meaning to say that everything else that is not a carbon of yours, I will eat. So therefore, carbon will ochalcha, or if he says, ha carbon shochalach, and also if he says, that carbon, I will eat from you, meaning to say, as we said earlier in our Gemara, this is also going to be permitted, because there it's as though he's taking a neder by the chaye carbon. He's like swearing by the life of a carbon, a vow by the life of a carbon, which we said earlier is nothing. And then the third possibility is, lo carbon, lo ochalcha, that which I do not eat from you is not a carbon, which would imply that which I do eat from you is a carbon. It's still going to be mutter, because that's also mutter, says our Mishnah, because we say that this goes according to Rabbi Meir, who says delay slay miklalav atashamehin, because Rabbi Meir says we don't accept this principle from the negative inference we go not the positive. So even though you're saying that which is not a carbon I will not eat from you, which we could have inferred that which I do eat from you is considered like a carbon, we don't say that, and so therefore it's permitted. So now on the top of Tez Zayin and Aleph, the Gemara says, Mani Mas Nisin, who is our Mishnah like? If you want to, it must be that it's like Rabbi Meir. Because the Rabbi Yehuda, because if you want to say it's Rabbi Yehuda, if you want to say our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, can't be. Why? As the Ran explains, the lo shanile carbon, the lo shanile ker carbon, the lo by kaf hadimyon, that Rabbi Meir says we don't draw a distinction between you say carbon or if you say kik carbon. Meaning to say that Rabbi Meir is going to say that the phrase carbon has the same effect as carbon, because he doesn't require the chafad dimyon. Because if he would say it's Rabbi Yehuda back in the Gemara, the Rabbi Yehuda lo shanile carbon, lo shanile ha carbon. Rabbi Yehuda would say that it doesn't matter if we say carbon or ha carbon. Why would we say carbon lo, as the Ran explains? The Rabbi Yehuda ma'ir carbon lo ochocha. That which I do not eat from you is a carbon that's permitted. I feel carbon even if he says that which I eat from you is a carbon, Rabbi Yehuda himself would say that that's also permitted. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda requires a chafad dimyon. You need to say like a carbon, and so therefore our Mishnah is obviously not Rabbi Yehuda. We have a problem. How can we say our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir? Amos Seifa. What about the next clause? It says lit carbon. That which I do not eat from you is a carbon, is permitted. But we have learned earlier in our tractate back on 11b that Rabbi Meir says, Rabbi Meir also, that Rabbi Meir says that if you say carbon, that which I do not eat from you is prohibited. And the reason why we say that is prohibited, because we say it's as though we had explained why it's permitted. The Amar Rabbi Abba Nasika Omer LeCarbon. Yeah, as Rabbi Abba explained how Rabbi Meir reads that Mishnah, how Rabbi Meir reads that phrase. It's as though that which it's as though he's saying LeCarbon. This will be a carbon, and therefore I will not eat it from you. So how can we say in this case LeCarbon LeOchalcha is mutar? So how can we say it's Rabbi Meir? So the Gemara explains. Lo kasha. It's not difficult. Hada amar likarban, hada amar lo likarban. If he uses the phrase likarban, then it's as though he's saying this will be for a carbon that would, and therefore I will not eat from you. And then the food is going to be prohibited. But if he says la carbon, meaning it is not a carbon, that which I do not eat from you is not a carbon, then it's going to be permitted because Rameir does not say so low carbon, the law of a carbon cover. He's saying it's not a carbon. Okay, so that's really a recapitulation of a lot of what we've had already earlier in our tractate. Now we go on to the next Mishnah, and the Mishnah says, Shavua lo ochalcha. If a person says, I take an oath that I will not eat from you, ha shvua she'ochalcha. Or if a person says, so meaning if a person says, I take an oath that I will not eat from you, meaning to say, I'm taking an oath upon myself that I will not eat from anything that you have. Or if he says the following, or if he says, lo shavua, ha shavua she'ochalcha, or if he says, I take an oath, and when in intending this oath, what he's saying is, this oath will be upon me if I eat from you. Or lo shvua lo ochalcha, or if he's saying this is not an oath, meaning to say, lo shvua lo ochalcha, that which I eat, which I do not eat from you, is not under oath, which you might have, which therefore we're saying the implication is the opposite, that which I do eat from you is under an oath, also, in all those cases going to be prohibited. And as the Mefarish explains, that even according to Rabbi Meir, who says, that by a vow, Rabbi Meir says we can't learn out the opposite inference. By an oath, Rabbi Meir doesn't say that. The Shvua is Rabbi Meir does say by an oath we can learn out the opposite inference. So in these three cases, if he says, I take an oath that I will not eat from you, or this is it, or under oath, anything that I eat from you is under oath, or there is not an oath, that which I do not eat from you is not under oath. All these cases, the Gemara says that it's going to be prohibited. So the Mishnah says it's going to be prohibited. So the Gemara says, well, the implication of our Mishnah is, Miklal daha shavua, we learn an implication from our Mishnah that this oath, she'ochalcha, if you say shavua she'ochalcha, if you say an oath upon that which I eat from you, means to say, the implication is you're saying an oath upon that which I eat from you, it means to say I take an oath that I'm not allowed to eat. That's really what you're saying. Gemara says, Veraminhu, we have a contradictory source from the Mesechas, Shavuos, a very, very difficult Mesechah Shavuos. When we get to Mesechah Shavuos, it says, the very beginning of Mesechah Shavuos, Daf Yud Tes, it says, Shavuos Shtayim Shein Arba, that the Torah says that there are two oaths which we, the Chazal, understand are four. Shavuos Shtayim Shein Arba, what are the two oaths? She'ochel v'shelo ochel. She'achalti v'shelo achalti. The first two are an oath that I will eat or that I will not eat. It also implies that I ate or that I did not eat. In all those cases, you're going to be chayav mid'oraisa. That an oath about the future, either you will do or you will not do. An oath about the past, either you did or you did not do. So midika amar shelo ochel, shelo ochel she'achalti, v'shelo achalti. So from the fact that it states a shvua that I will not eat, and the fact that it states, hold on, there's just a little change in the gear, so let me just look over at this side. Right, from the fact that it says sha'ochel, v'shelo ochel, sha'achalti, v'shelo achalti, from the fact that it says all four of these expressions, this proves miklal the sha'ochelcha the achil namashma. Means this proves from here that if he's taken oath, the shvua sha'ochelcha means that I will actually eat, not that I will not eat, like we're learning our Gemara or our Mishnah. So why does our Mishnah say when it says shvua sha'ochelcha? Well, how can we interpret it means an oath that you will not eat? When from the Gemara and Shavuos, that phrase means an oath that you will eat. So the first answer is from Abaye. And Abaye she'ochel shtei lashonos mashma. So if you say an oath that I will eat from you, can imply two things. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. An oath that I will eat from you can imply two things. One is it can imply how you misarvim boachol. They could be like forcing him to try and eat. They keep asking him to eat. V'amar achilna achilna, and he'll say, listen, I'll eat. And so therefore I'll say, look, I'll eat, meaning to say that what he's saying is basically he's saying, I'll eat, that because you're keep harassing me, wait a little bit, I'll eat. That could be one explanation. V'su shvua she'ochel, and he says furthermore, he says, I'll take an oath that I'll eat, which is indeed an oath that he's going to eat. That's one way that it can mean. Avo Amar, but if they were saying to him, but if he said, lo achilna, but if he says, I don't want to eat, Visu Amar, and then he says, Shvua sha'ochel, I'll swear that I'll eat, but there it's taking the opposite. There, the lo achilna kamar, there what he's really saying is, I'm not going to eat. Meaning to say, he's saying, stop harassing me. He said, so meaning to say, he's saying, there when he says Shvua sha'ochel, he's saying, there he's taking an oath that I'm not going to eat. So it all depends upon the context and the way he responds. He could either say Shvua she'ochel, it can either be an oath that I will eat or an oath that I won't eat, depending on the context of what you're saying. That's what Abaye says. That's why here it means, in our Mishnah and Nedarim, means an oath that I won't eat, whereas in Shavuos it says it means an oath that I will eat. So that's the answer of Abaye. Rav Ashi Amar, Rav Ashi says no. Sha'ochel dishvua she'iochel ka'amar. So he says, if he's like when he says here, shvua she'ochel, that which he says here, an oath that I will eat, really we have to read it as though he's saying an oath that I will not eat. Shvua she'iochel. So that's the way we basically have to amend our text or read these words into the text of our Mishnah. He doesn't say oath that I will eat, he says an oath that I will not eat. Well, the Gemara says, "Im came pshita." Well, that's obvious. Well, obviously, if he's taken an oath that I will not eat, then it's going to be prohibited for him to eat. Ma'il Meimer, what's the chiddush here? So the Gemara says, "Ma'il the tema." You might have thought to say the following: "Meikam lishnahi the itkilei." You might have thought that he didn't intend to say this. Meikam lishnahu the itkilei. That he really didn't intend to say it. Well, we'll read what the Mefarish says. That the Mefarish says as follows: that which he says, an oath that I will not eat, make him lishne, komar tikun halashonhu. That it's a messed up language, meaning to say he didn't really intend to say that. Or not tikun halashon, tiko halashon, meaning to say he messed up. He intended to say I will eat. And he messed up and he said, actually, I won't eat. So then we read it as though maybe he intended to say the opposite, and just the words came out the wrong way. And so therefore, that's what we thought to say. Kamash Malan, we see from here that we follow what he actually said, and we don't believe it if he said, actually, I didn't intend to say that. Meaning not that he right away said it, but later on he says, oh, actually, I meant to say the other way. We don't believe it. And we say you took an oath not to eat. So the Gemara says, Abaye Omer time Rav Ashi. Abaye doesn't accept Rav Ashi's explanation. Abaye says depends upon the context, because that's not what our Mishnah says. Because our Mishnah doesn't say he took an oath not to eat. For Rav Ashi, Nadim and Tam de Abaye, Rav Ashi doesn't accept Abaye's answer. Because he says, the reason why Rav Ashi does not accept Abaye's answer is because he says shelo ochel can also imply that I will eat or that I will not eat. It could also imply both things. It's not just ochel that can imply both things, but also that I will not eat can imply both things. Meaning to say, if they're forcing him to eat, Amar lo achilna, Amar nami shvua bein she'ochel bein so Amar nami shvua, meaning to say the shelo ochel can also be read as making an oath to eat or an oath to not eat. Depends on the context. If they're trying to get him to eat, they're trying to get him. He says, I'm taking an oath, I'm not going to eat. That could be understood depending upon how he's saying it as an oath. Okay, I'll eat already. I'm taking an oath about not eating, meaning to say I'm going to eat. So therefore, hadin achilna. So therefore, bein she'ochel bein she'lo ochel hadin achilna mashma. the Amar so we say from here, since it can mean either way, so meaning to say that, let me go back and read in America. Amar Nami Shvua, if he says an oath, if he says an oath, whether he says ochel or lo ochel, it could imply either way. It could imply to eating. And so therefore, you could explain it that if he says shvua shelo ochel, shvua lo ochel nekamer, he could explain it as an oath to eat or as an oath not to eat. So therefore, since you could read it either way, Ella Tana Psaka. So since you could have used this word either way, the Tana as a baseline said when he takes the oath she'ochel dachil namashma, that means to eat, and mishlochel lo ochel mashma implies that he doesn't eat. So since you could read it either way, why would the Tana make our lives difficult by putting in the opposite phrase and say, well, in the context it could mean eating? That's not the way Rashi says that the Mishnah would have adopted that approach, and so therefore he doesn't accept Rabbi's explanation. Okay, so now the next Mishnah, the Mishnah on the bottom of 16a, the Mishnah says, this is one of the difficulties of it's not difficult, this is one of the stringencies of oaths over vows. And also there are stringencies of vows over oaths. Let's say Amar Konem Sukkah Shani Oseh or Lulav Shani Nota. Let's say a person takes an oath. He says that a sukkah that I make or a lulav that I shake or tefillin Shani Maniach or the tefillin that I wear, those are prohibited to me via carbon. Ben Nedarim aser. So by a neder he can make these things prohibited upon himself. But b'shvuos mutter. But by an oath, we're going to say that those things are not going to take effect. Those vows will not take effect. Because if you take an oath to violate a mitzvah, it won't take effect. If you take an oath to take a vow to violate a mitzvah, the vow will take effect. But if you take an oath to violate a mitzvah, the oath will not take effect. So this is a stringency of a vow over a shvua. So the Gemara says, well, so basically the way you read the Mishnah is when it starts, this is the stringency of Shavuos over Nedarim, and the Farish explains that which we said above, Shavuos Shelo Ochal, that by Shavuos it's Aser, but in Nedarim that's Mutter, because of Rabbi Meir's position. Well, now we're saying a stringency of a vow over an oath, which is that a vow takes effect on a mitzvah, whereas an oath doesn't. So the Gemara first starts by reviewing a concept. Chomer mikal the nederhu. So we're saying that if you say a chomer b'shuas of nedarim, so this implies that the vow will take effect. And what are we referring to? We're referring to an earlier case, meaning to say that if you say, the Gemara assumes that we're talking about this point that we said shvua shelo ochel, an oath that I will not eat from you, then it's prohibited because you say that which I do eat from you is under an oath. That which I don't eat from you is not is that shvua lo ochelcha, that an oath about that which I do not eat from you is not prohibited under an oath. That's what we just said. If I take an oath that I'm not going to eat from you, we're going to say that that's prohibited. But by a neder, we're saying that it will not apply, and that's why a stringency will be more severe than a neder. But you say that this is a stringency, that implies that the neder is actually applicable, it's just not as strict. But we said if you take an oath, karban lo ochelcha, vow, we go into our Mishnah, it's mutter. So therefore it should be completely permitted. Why do we say it's just the stringency of an oath over a vow? So the Gemara says, yeah, what we're referring to is when we say that this is the stringency of the shvua over neder, we're referring to a seifa de idach bava katani. We're referring to the conclusion of the earlier Mishnah where we said shvua shani yashein shani medaber shvua shani yashein shvua shani medaber shani mahalech aser. So if you take an oath that I'm not going to sleep, that I'm not going to speak, that I'm not going to walk, we say that oath is it's prohibited for you. The oath takes effect. And zeh chomer b'shvuos nedarim. That's biblically speaking. So that's a stringency of an oath over a vow, because biblically speaking, the vow will not take effect, but rabbinically speaking, the vow will take effect. So now the Gemara says, chomer b'nedarim b'shvuos keitzad. So we said, what's an example of where vows are stricter than oaths? That is by the case of a mitzvah. That if you take an oath about a mitzvah, the oath is not binding, but if you take a vow about a mitzvah, the vow is binding. So Rav Kahana taught, Amar Rav Gido Amar Rav, whereas Rav Tavyumi Masnei, Amar Rav Gido Amar Shmuel. So what did they teach? Minayin she'ein nishbayin lavor on mitzvahs. How do we know that if you take an oath to violate a mitzvah, the mitzvah does not, the oath does not take effect? Tamomer lo yachel dvaro. It says in the pasuk, what is the verse referring to? Ishki dor neder Hashem. The man takes a vow to God. O yishava shvuah, or isar al nafsho, or he takes an oath to prohibit something. Lo yachel dvaro. He cannot violate his words. So k'chol yotzei mipiv yaseh. So what does it mean? Lo yachel dvaro. What does that mean? Dvaro lo yachel. His own words he cannot violate. Aval meichal hu chavtzei shemayim. But if it was a vow, if it was an oath about something that was related to heaven, then this prohibition of not violating it will not take effect. Meaning to say, lo yachel dvaro means to say it's only a binding oath if it was about his own words, but not if it was about something related to shemayim, chavtzei shemayim. So the Gemara asked the question, Ma'ishna neder, why do we say that the vow is binding by a neder, but not by an oath? Ma'ishna neder, tichsev ishki dor neder Hashem. By a neder, we're going to say it's binding because it says if a person will make a vow to God, it's the prohibition of lo yachel applies. But shvuah nami aksev ho hishava shvuah Hashem. We should also say, we should read the words O hishava shvuah as also referring back to God, that if it's an oath from God, it should be binding. Lo yachel dvaro. Why don't we read it that way? So the Gemara says, because we could read the oath as Hashem O hishava shvuah. Meaning to say, you can read the word Hashem as applying, just like we read it applies to a neder, that the vow takes effect upon a mitzvah. You could easily read it that way, that it takes effect upon an oath. So why do we say it only applies to a neder and not to an oath? Amar Abaye, Hada Amar. So Abaye says what we're referring to is that there's two spheres, that the logic is, Abaye says, really Abaye, then we'll read the Ran here. Abaye says, Abaye says one case is where he says the benefit of the sukkah is upon me. He's making the vow upon the sukkah. It's on the tangible item, and he's prohibiting it upon himself. And and one is where he says, I take an oath that I will not benefit from the sukkah. So what does Abaye say? Look at the Ran. Komar svarahu. So he says it's logical, this is what the Ran's saying, it's logical to say that the word Hashem in that verse does not refer to an oath, but only refers to a vow. That if you take that the pasuk is telling us if you take a vow upon a mitzvah, it's applicable, but not an oath. Mishum the neder bedinu sheichol var mitzvah afilu shu oser al tzmo hanas sukkah, because the law is really that the vow should take effect upon a mitzvah, even though he's benefiting upon himself the benefit of the sukkah. And the reason is shalashon neder kachu, because that's the lashon of the way the neder is working, meaning to say that you're prohibiting the sukkah upon yourself. And we have a concept, we can't feed somebody something that's prohibited. Of a lashon shvuah, but the expression of an oath is that I will not sin with sukkah. And he can't exclude himself from the mitzvah of sukkah, which he's commanded in. So basically, that's Abaye's answer. That depends upon the way a vow is formulated versus the way an oath is formulated. That a vow is formulated upon the object, the chavtza, and therefore you could prohibit an object upon yourself. Whereas an oath is formulated from the gavra, from the person, and you can't prohibit yourself from doing the mitzvah. That's Abaye's explanation. So Amar Rava says, I don't accept that. Rava says, Rava is not challenging Abaye because he says, this is how the Ran says, Rava is not challenging Abaye's explanation. Devadai Shaper Kamar. He says for sure Abaye is saying correct logic. Ela alishne. He's saying on what's he challenging? The Lashon, the Amar Ana Sukkah Sarai, that even if he says the benefit of the sukkah is upon me, he should still be allowed to sit in there. Yoshiv Yeshiva Shal Mitzvah should still be allowed to sit in there, and he won't be in violation of the oath. The mitzvah lava enes ninu. So meaning to say, you don't get any benefit from the sukkah. So because it's a sukkah is a mitzvah, and therefore that's not considered a benefit. So Rava is saying, even if you say the benefit of the sukkah is upon me, and then I'm not allowed to sit in the sukkah, I'm not allowed to benefit from the sukkah, you still should be allowed because it's not called benefit. Elam Rava, Hadamar Yeshiva Sukkah Alai, V'Hadamar Shvua Shel Eshev Sukkah. So Rava says the following. Rava says, if he says the benefit of the sukkah is upon me, then under those circumstances, he's allowed to sit in the sukkah because that's not called benefit. But when the Mishnah says that the neder is applicable and it nullifies the mitzvah, that's where he says yeshiva sukkah alai, meaning to say sitting in the sukkah is prohibited. And even though he's allowed to fulfill the mitzvah and get benefit, he's not allowed to actually sit in the sukkah because he says actually sitting in the sukkah is what's prohibited. So the Ran brings in the name of Tosfos that he's able to prohibit the sitting in the sukkah even though he's not prohibited in the benefit. And so therefore, so that's what he's saying. He's not talking anything about the benefit at all. He's just saying, I'm taking an oath that I will not sit in the sukkah. So Gemara says, well, let's ask a more general question. This concept, is this really the source for the idea that you're not allowed to take an oath to violate a mitzvah? Don't we learn that from the other place? Do we learn that from here? We learn that from there. As we learned in Shvuas Tafchav Zayin, I might think that you can take an oath to violate a mitzvah, and then you didn't actually nullify the mitzvah. I might think that you're liable, but we know you're not because Talmud Omer Lahara. The pasuk says if a person takes an oath, just like if you take an oath to do something, it is something that's a rishus. So meaning to say, just like that, it has to be about something that's optional. Meaning to say, you allow yourself to eat something permitted, and not you're not missing a mitzvah. So too, afara. So too, if you take an oath in the opposite way, it has to be something that's discretionary, meaning to say that you're allowed to eat. But if you take an oath to nullify the mitzvah, the little detail, and you don't actually nullify it, which you're not allowed to do, that's excluded. That's excluded from the prohibition of shvuas b'itoy. So if that's the case, why do we say the source is from Ishkidor Neder Hashem? The source should be La Ra'oi Tev. So the Gemara explains, so the Gemara says, one pasuk is to tell us that if you take an oath to violate a mitzvah, you're exempt from bringing the carbon for violating the oath. And one pasuk is to tell us you're exempt from the prohibition. Okay, so we'll stop here. I'm going to remind